Good morning. This is Amber Painter from the Indiana State Library. I'm the Southwest Regional Coordinator from the Professional Development Office. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. We're pleased to have Jeanette Lair with us today to speak about VR programming. I'd like to start off the webinar with a few announcements. If you'd like to register for other webinars available from us, you can do that by going to the Professional Development Office's Continuing Education page and seeing our list of current and upcoming webinars. The Indiana State Library has many ways that we try to stay connected to library staff across the state. For weekly updates on upcoming trainings and to learn more about what's happening in libraries across the state, please subscribe to our weekly e-newsletter, The Wednesday Word. We also offer a blog which provides information about Indiana State collections, interview spotlights on library staff from across the state, and information about upcoming events at the Indiana State Library. If at any point during today's webinar you experience any technical issues, that are associated with audio, please check the sound issues box to make sure that it's not a local issue specific to your computer. If there's any global sound issues, we'll put out a notice to the chat box to let everybody know. Today's webinar will be archived and available for access after it's been transcribed. If you would like a TLEU for today's training, one will be available for download at the end of the presentation. You just have to download a copy, update the document with your name, and then save a copy for your records. And without further ado, I'd like to turn the presentation over now to Jeanette.
Hello, everybody. My name is Jeanette Lair. I work for Monroe County Public Library in Bloomington, Indiana. Today we're going to talk about leveling up your VR programming. So I've been working here as the digital creativity specialist. Oh, how do I advance the slide? Okay. I've been working as the digital creativity specialist at the Monroe County Public Library for about the last three years. And I have a background in video production, media studies, and I've gotten to have a lot of fun delving into new forms of media over the last 3 years, and VR is one of my favorite new technologies. So today we're going to talk about kind of what is VR. We're going to do an equipment overview and kind of talk about budget-friendly versus kind of budget-heavy options. Talk a little bit about what kind of technology is coming out soon. And then I'll go into some examples of programs that we've done here at the library, at Monroe County Public Library, and we'll talk about some challenges. And I'll give you a couple of ideas for how to convince perhaps your supervisors with outcome-based assessment, and we'll also just give you a little list of some program ideas, and then we'll have questions. I'm also happy to take questions throughout, and maybe I'll stop a couple times and ask. I actually just wanted to start out asking everybody how many of you have tried VR yourself, if you wouldn't mind typing into the chat box if you've tried out VR, and then if you have, if it's been more of like a phone-based VR or a more advanced Oculus Rift type headset. I just kind of wanted to get an idea of who we're talking with today and what kind of audience is out there. So I'm just kind of looking at some of the answers, and it looks like it's kind of a mix so far. Great. Okay. And also, could you just answer one more question for me? Have you guys done any VR programming in your library, or if you're kind of here with, at the baseline, just starting out? And then we'll go ahead and get started. I just want to kind of look at some of the answers.
So I'm seeing no programming yet. MK Eagle says, yes, we do VR. Quite a few people are, but they're just starting out in it.
That's great.
So it looks like for most part, most people have a little bit of an understanding of what it entails.
Great. Okay.
It's okay. It's fine.
Thank you. Okay, so I know that everybody already knows what VR is, but I just thought it would be interesting to see what the actual definition is, because it actually is kind of a primitive definition here in a set of images, sounds produced by a computer that seem to represent a place or situation that a person can take part in. Um, okay, great. So one of the big kind of interesting kind of things to talk about or to make sure we get out of the way is that we're talking about VR and not AR and what the difference between those two is. AR is actually, potentially going to be maybe more accessible because people don't have to be outside of their reality, right? Like you can see your environment in front of you, and you're adding objects to it, so you can actually still be walking down the street, and use AR. So that there's a lot of development happening right now, technology-wise, to enhance our lives using AR. And VR is what we're going to be talking about today, which is much more engrossing. It kind of takes you out of your environment and puts you in a virtual environment, and that is what we're going to be talking about today. And so I'm going to be referring to Immersive VR and Google Cardboard. Even though there's a lot of different types of Google Cardboard out there, it's kind of the new, like it's like a Kleenex term. So when I say Google Cardboard, I don't necessarily mean the cardboard, the one you see in the middle there, the little cardboard box. That's a Google Cardboard. There's lots of different types of Google Cardboards out there, but these are the ones that you put your phone in. Most of the time, there's no immersion as far as hand controls. You can't pick things up. You can't interact in that way, but you still can see and turn your head, and it's still a very cool experience. But I'm mostly going to be talking about immersive VR, although we are going to go over the Google Cardboard equipment because I know that not everybody can afford the headsets. So we're going to kind of go over the equipment first here and talk about that. On the left there is a picture from one of our programs, and that's the HTC Vive. You usually have headphones on too. He doesn't have them on in this picture, but you're going to get audio, picture, and interactivity with your hands here. So go to the next slide. So first we'll talk about Google Cardboard headsets, and these require a phone that, as you can see there, it says additional at least $200 to $350. And where I got those prices is that it looks like Apple is no longer selling iPods on their main website, and you can still get them at Best Buy and places like that for about $200. And those will work. That's kind of the cheapest option for a phone or for a device for your Google Cardboard. But it does look like they're not going to be available for much longer. The 350 is the cheapest iPhone that you can get from Apple. So that's kind of the lower end. And then you can see the different prices here for the different headsets. And some of them are obviously, it ranges wildly. There's so many out there. I only put 5 different options on this slide, but you can actually probably find, 50 or more different types of Google Cardboard headsets out there. And a lot of them are really highly rated and do a great job at what they do, which is, again, mostly just the visual immersion, and you really can't do too much interacting, but it's still really cool to do. It's a really great way to start out, and there's a lot of really cool programs you can do with Google Cardboard. So next slide. And then we're going to just talk a little bit about the immersive VR headsets. And so I do know that there are a couple, the Vive Pro, and there's some other ones, but these are the 3 main headsets that are out right now. These require high-powered computers or PlayStation 4 when it comes to the PSVR for an additional cost. So the computers do range from anywhere from about $900 to $2,000. I mean, you could probably spend $4,000 on one, but you're probably getting taken at that point. So I think on average it's about $1,200 to $1,500 for a pretty good computer, but you can get some for about $900. That have, and there are specs, and I didn't put them here because it's really easy to find the specs online, but you do need a specific amount of processing power and a graphics card that can handle it. So you can't just kind of grab one of your library desktops or whatever, usually, unless you have really nice desktops. And so these are the current prices of these headsets. So we're looking at about twice as much as Google Cardboard, about. And the other thing I didn't mention about Google Cardboard is obviously if you have your own phone or your own device that you're willing to use, your own personal one that you're willing to use for the library for programming, then obviously that's a way cheaper way to go. I would definitely discourage people from requiring people to bring their own phones just because not everybody has one. But anyway, back to the immersive ones. These are the ones that you're going to get, that full immersion. So at this point, I'd be happy to take any questions about the equipment. Otherwise, we can move on. A couple of things to kind of look forward to in the future. I don't want to dissuade you from purchasing now if you're interested in purchasing one of those immersive headsets, because I don't know how long it's going to be, but there is the Oculus Go right now, which is a standalone VR. So we're talking like it's wireless. It requires no phone and no computer. It's all inside the headset. It just came out and I haven't tried it, so I can't really speak too much to it. It's $200. So it's actually could be a really good option. It's still not interactive though, so you're not really going to get to pick things up with both of your hands and turn things over and look, inspect things. So that is something that is on the horizon. I don't think it'll be too much longer before we start seeing those like all-inclusive VR headsets. We're obviously looking towards lower costs. They've already gone down. When we bought our headsets, we have a Vive and a Rift. When we bought them, they were about $300 more 2 years ago. So they've already gone down $300, and they're just probably going to go down more, although I don't know how much more. So that's something to look forward to. Wireless is obviously, I think everybody's ready for wireless. If you've tried the Vive or the Oculus Rift, that's the most annoying thing about it. And that hopefully will be coming soon too. I know there's already some in the works out there. Eye tracking is also something that they're working on, which is where when your eyes jump from something in the foreground to something in the background, in real life your eyes automatically focus, but in VR it doesn't do that. So being able to track where your eye is going, it's going to feel much more realistic and be even more immersive to be able to change your viewpoint throughout the experience. And then, of course, the other senses like haptics, which is where you can actually feel an object. I mean, that's going to really change things a lot when they figure that out. I know that they're already working on technology that uses sound waves to actually make it feel like there's something in your hand. So if you were to reach out your hand and in VR, there's like, a rock put in your hand, like somehow the sound waves will bounce around in a way that makes it feel like you're holding something. So there's a lot of really cool things on the horizon. And then smell, that people are working on smell and heat and wind. I put that there mostly because in that picture there, that is someone local here in Bloomington who has developed this technology to add other components to your virtual reality. And we're actually going to have him come here and demo this program that he has. So he calls it Hot Air Balloon Ride, and very exciting title. And he's going to be demoing this here at the library. But I guess once the burners start on the hot air balloon, you're going to be able to feel the heat from them. And then when you get up to a certain elevation inside of the hot air balloon, you're going to be able to feel the wind because he's got the fans. And so it's supposed to be pretty amazing and even more immersive than the current versions. So really excited to try that out. I think that's going to be early next year. So if you're interested in coming for that, keep posted. That's fine. So I kind of want to jump into the programs that we do here at the library, and I'm going to talk about 6 different kinds of programs. And these are all things that we have done here. So the first one is demos. And actually, you can go on to the next slide. Okay. That was a short slide. So VR demos is kind of the first thing that we did here with our headsets. It's like kind of one of the easiest things and kind of one of the, it's an intro to the headset. So no one in our community, that I knew of had really tried it much. So it's a really great way to kind of just showcase what VR headsets can do. So in this picture, we're at the Wonder Lab, which is a local like science museum for children. And we had it kind of set up there that people could come try out the headset. But you can also do this in the library atrium or, anywhere in your library too, or at outreach events like this. And what we did was we'll have a queue or a sign-up sheet depending on how many people are there. Sign-up sheets can be really handy because you can tell them what time to come back. If it starts getting long, people can come back in an hour for their time slot, and they don't have to just stand there the whole time. And they get to try a variety of experiences. So they usually I try to tell them, okay, either you're going to interact with a robot or go into outer space, or use an art program, just because if you let them look through everything you have, it could take a while. So, but yeah, they get to try out what they like, what they're interested in, and that helps them to probably be set up to like it even more because it's something that they're interested in. And then they each get an allotted time. I either set a timer or just look at the clock, but usually in a demo type situation, it's about 5 to 10 minutes. If it's not super crowded, 10 to 15. And of course, bringing like program guides and business cards for outreach events. I guess that's a pretty obvious thing. But you usually get pretty busy, and if you don't have an extra person there, it's really hard to talk to people about what's going on at the library. If you do have an extra person, then that's ideal. Because then you can talk to people while that person kind of helps people fit on the headset and kind of start them with their experience. So that's one type of program that we do. The next type of program is where you get a little bit more specific into a type of experience. We call this Experience VR. That's just what I've been calling it. And some examples are, like in this photo, Keep Talking and Nobody Explodes, where one person is in the headset and you can't actually see what they're seeing on the screen there. That's just kind of a blank screen. But inside the headset, she's looking at a bomb, and it's got puzzles and all kinds of things on it. Wires, different colored wires, different symbols, and everyone sitting on the couch there has a red binder, and it has all kinds of very confusing instructions on how to defuse the bomb. And there's a timer, counting down on the bomb, and they have to ask her, how many wires do you see, and what color are they? And it's a really cool communication test and kind of a collaborative game, which is really cool. But we've also done short films in VR. We've done 3D modeling where then we can print their model after they're done designing it, flight simulation, all kinds of different things. Usually we try to use both of our headsets if we have volunteers or extra staff to help run, because then you can have more people, because usually we give them about 15 minutes per person here. We also have them register in advance usually, and then when they get there, sign up for a time slot. It just helps kind of keep things organized. And then we'll talk more about volunteers later, but VR volunteers have been essential in our VR programming here because that frees up staff, and we're I don't know about you guys, but we're pretty short staffed a lot of the time here at the library, so it really helps, and usually they're just really into VR, so they like doing it anyway. So that's Experience VR. Next is AllDay VR, which this came because of people not getting enough time, saying they didn't have enough time. And I apologize, this picture, I never have gotten a picture of AllDay VR, but it happens in our video studio. So I kind of just put this picture in here so you could see the space. But what we do is I just actually have people email me for time slots, and they get 1 entire hour with the headset. So it fills up pretty quickly, as you can imagine. I usually just do it once a quarter, once a program cycle. And usually I do it on Fridays. It's just worked out well. We're open from 10 to 6 on Fridays, so it's a little bit less hours than some of our other days. And then there's a 10 o'clock appointment, a 11, a 12, all the way through till 5 o'clock at the end of the day. And we do usually utilize volunteers to help out, because that way I can go do work in the other room, and the volunteer can sit nearby and help with any questions or problems that they might have. And they get the time to actually get immersed in a program or a game that is more involved, because a lot of the times with those demos and those shorter experiences, they just don't have time to really see what VR has to offer. So that's AllDay VR. And then we have our VR development camp, which we did one time. So this was a week-long camp, and it was split into 2 groups. And on the top you can see that's the Photo Safari group, and we partnered with our local history center, and they brought down artifacts from their storage or from their exhibits, and the Photo Safari group came in and used photogrammetry, which is where you take it's basically a lot easier and more efficient sometimes as than scanning an object, a 3D scanner. So you take a bunch of photos all the way around the object from every single angle, and then they get stitched together in a stitching software, and then it becomes a 3D object. So that's the Photo Safari group did that during the week. And then on the bottom picture, you can see that the building downtown in VR was the other group, and they learned Unity and created a VR city. So the idea was that we were going to create um, our own version of downtown Bloomington. It wasn't really going to necessarily look anything like actual Bloomington, but it was a virtual version of Bloomington. And they could add whatever streets and buildings that they wanted, and they would add the artifacts that were gathered from the Photo Safari group. So the Photo Safari group used those artifacts from the History Center, but then they also went around town and did photos of statues and other things in town to add to the city. Um, they library staff mostly took care of, the getting the lunch and making sure they had all the technology they needed and just doing kind of all of the logistics, which obviously was a lot of work. But then what we really needed was the people that knew the skills. And this is kind of my specialty, is finding other people to teach things for me, because I just don't know everything. And so finding the right people to come in and teach it was the essential thing. If you can find anyone in town who has these skills, it was a really popular camp. And then on the last day, you can actually go to the next slide. On the last day, we had the demos of the city, and all the friends and family came, and we had snacks, and we had a lot of people there. And you can see in that photo, like, kind of what it looked like. It was never going to be perfect. Doing this in a week actually was impressive. I couldn't believe that they were, able to come up with anything in that short of a period of time. And you can see some of the artifacts in that photo, and the city and all the buildings that were put in, and people just got to try it out, and it was a really big success. And I'm happy to talk more about that if anyone has any questions, and I'll provide my email address later. Okay, so we can go ahead and move on to VR talks. We've only done one of these so far too, although I definitely anticipate more. We just recently had a talk with Peter Rubin, the senior editor of Wired Magazine, who just happens to be a local. He doesn't live in Bloomington, but he's from Bloomington, and so he was coming back for a wedding, and we were able to snag him. He just put out a book called Future Presence. It's all about the future of virtual reality and the implications that it has for kind of the future of society, and it's super interesting, really good book. I definitely recommend it. Again, that's called Future Presence. Anyway, the mayor came. He's really interested in innovation and technology, so he came and moderated a panel of experts from Indiana University. And so Peter talked about his book, and then there was a panel. It was really good. We had a great show of people, and a lot of people were engaged and asking questions. And it's also just a great way to position the library as somewhere where people come to talk about and interact with technology. We did some demos before and after the talk. So that's another option if you don't have the technology yet, but you want to start talking about VR. That's another possibility. And then the last kind of program is just checking out the PS4 VR. So we have a PS4 VR, but we only use it in our teen space for now. Sorry, the picture's a little blurry. But we do have an all ages day once a month so that other people can use it. But for the most part, it's a teen tech tool. And just as teens in our space can check out Wii or PS4 controllers at any time for 1 hour, they can also check out the PSVR. And they just need their library card. They get 1 hour. And then we actually keep track of how long they have it. And then they have to take a 30-minute break. That's to avoid people dominating the machine. We have some shy kids, as I'm sure everyone does, who don't want to kick anyone off or ask them to get off of the headset or the video game. So we do enforce that 30-minute break pretty strongly, and that does give other people a chance to get in there and check it out. So those are the types of programs that we've done here at the library. So next, I'll just talk about some of the challenges involved with VR programming. So age restrictions is definitely something to talk about. I'm going to talk about that more in a second. That's why there's a little asterisk over there, because there's going to be a whole slide about the age restrictions. But it is definitely something to keep in mind and inform patrons about. We have a kind of a caveat in our program guide that if you're under 12, you have to have an adult with you, but we will talk more about that in a second. Oops, go back one slide, actually. There we go. The cost is obviously a challenge. This is the kind of thing that, I mean, you just have to convince your supervisor that it's worthy of the cost if you can. And there are ways that you can do that. We can talk about outcome-based assessment in a minute. The time limitations, like just even the planning time involved in the getting to know the technology, but also the fact that the program takes a certain amount of time. Those are all things to consider. If you can, get volunteers, and we'll talk more about that too. And then the other two things here, like just not, you may say like you don't have the skill or the expertise, but it is much easier than you think. So I would just not be daunted by the technology. If you know a little bit about computers, you're going to be just fine. And obviously, if you work at a library, you have lots of information right at your fingertips. And then the technology does advance, and that's a little scary sometimes to know when to buy. Just do your research, but I do think that like the nicer headsets are still very relevant and are going to be for years still. So I'm glad we got them when we did, and I'm sure we'll still be using them 2 or 3 years from now, or 4 or 5. Okay, so I'll talk a little bit more specifically about some of those challenges. I just wanted to definitely talk about age restrictions because it is important to at least inform patrons about. Up in the right-hand corner, you can see the restrictions by headset. So the Oculus does not recommend that you use the Rift for anyone under 13. The PlayStation says under 12, and the Vive doesn't have an age listed, but it does say that it's not intended for young children. So just kind of to go through some of the reasons why, or some of the impacts on young children. VR, there are some new studies out right now that say that it can increase empathy in young kids. There was a study about, I think it was Elmo, and they did a kind of a study versus watching Elmo on TV and watching him in VR, and they were just much more sympathetic and compassionate with Elmo in VR than outside of VR. It kind of just goes across the board, not just with kids, but with anyone. Like your brain actually processes your virtual experience as a real experience in a way, even though you might know that they're saying that the part of your brain that processes real memories is the part of the brain that handles VR. So, I mean, that's obviously there's a concern there that if you get the wrong kind of content, it could traumatize a kid or whatever. But I think that's similar to video game. Some of the worries in video games is just content. The, I guess, more concerning one is balance, hand-eye coordination, and visual concentration, eye development in general. But most of the people I talk to, especially some of the experts from IU, they say that it has more to do with long-term exposure and not allowing kids to be in a headset for 2 or 3 hours straight. But part of the concern is that kids just don't tend to know when they don't tend to report eye pain, or they don't pay attention to pain or eye strain, or the symptoms of eye strain. So it's just kind of something to keep an eye on. The seizures, motion sickness, and falling down, those are physical side effects that the seizures are the same exact concern that people have with video games. So if you're prone to seizures, you may be more prone to have a seizure. VR is not seizure inducing in and of itself. It's the same exact concern that we have with video games. The motion sickness and falling down, some people just get motion sickness more, and they're going to put it on and immediately get sick, feel sick, and they're not going to want to take it off, and that's fine. It's not for everyone. And people do tend to fall down, more adults and children, because it is very convincing, especially these more immersive headsets. And I've seen people try to lean on tables that aren't actually there and fall down. So it is definitely a concern. You absolutely have to make sure your space is clear and free from debris and things that can be tripped on. And that's why having someone there to make sure they're not tripping over the cable or tripping over objects is really important. Every time we have a VR program, there has to be someone there. We don't leave people without someone monitoring them. And also, really, just one of the main things is headsets don't fit young children. They're not designed for young children. I've had programs where parents want their 3-year-old to try on the headset. They want them to experience virtual reality, and I can tell them all day long that it's not going to fit them, and they care. They just want their kid to try it. So I put it on their head and it falls off of them, and then that's it. Um, those are kind of just some of the things that are being talked about right now when it comes to young children in VR. But as a caveat, the research is still very new. I mean, this is, the Oculus and Vive just came out in 2016 with a more like universal version that people could get. And so it's still inconclusive and there are still studies being done. But I will say again that the experts that I've spoken with, they let their kids do. I'm not trying to convince you, and I'm not, giving advice, but they aren't really that concerned about it unless you're, letting your kid use it for 2 or 3 hours. So for library programs, it's probably not a concern, but we do require a parent or adult be present with a kid under 12. And then even sometimes we have printed out some of the articles that we found and had the adult look through them. I don't always do that. Sometimes I just tell them it's not recommended and let them make the decision. I didn't put any links to articles here because really there aren't that many, but you can absolutely Google children and VR and find what I've found. And I think Peter Rubin talks about it a little bit in his book as well. So I'm sure there's some other places to find information out there. So that's age restrictions. Another challenge with VR that we can talk about, if you want to go to the next slide, is the VR volunteers. Recruiting volunteers is, like I said before, it's been essential for our programming. I can barely do many of the programs that I do without volunteers because it is time consuming. So just notice who comes to VR programs a lot. If you can have a couple of programs where you're doing it on a smaller scale, and then you find or you hear other kids talking about how much they want to do VR, encourage them to become a VR volunteer. Teens are a perfect pool because they love VR. I mean, they are by far the most interested audience. They need to build their resume, and we give them 30 minutes when the program's over with the VR headset. So that's a great incentive. So we don't really have a problem finding them. Obviously, teens are harder to get to show up sometimes because their lives are just crazy and they have a lot going on. So if you can find a good, reliable VR volunteer, just shower them with gifts. Just kidding. But yeah, really try to get them to come because they are great. They are great to use for programming help. We do put a call out for VR volunteers in our teen space up on the dry erase wall, and then we just have like new interested volunteers train with another teen during a program before doing it on their own, and they do help set up and tear down, and they're great, great people to recruit. So that's recruiting VR volunteers, and so trying to convince your supervisor that VR programs are worthwhile. One of the kind of new, I don't know if it's new for you guys, but like our library just loves outcomes. Our admin, they love outcomes. They want to know what are your outcomes? What are your outcomes for this program? So this chart has been really helpful for me. So first, just to say what an outcome is, you really want to nail down your specific audience with each outcome. And it's their change or improvement in skills or knowledge brought about by experiencing a program. So outcome-based assessment can be extremely powerful in convincing someone. If you just take a look at this chart, and I'm happy to email anyone a full chart, although I changed it up with VR's examples at the end. But there's certain types of outcome and a definition, but really what you're looking at is that example. So for the knowledge outcome with a VR program, you want to pinpoint that audience, and then you want to use like a positive action statement, like students will increase their knowledge about space or outer space by doing, this program on outer space, where they're going to go into space. So you're basically saying that this is the intended outcome, is that the student is going to increase their knowledge about space. And that's, if you can achieve that outcome, that's pretty impressive. Teachers will learn how to use VR in their classrooms. I mean, these are all kinds of things that you want to happen that you're telling your supervisor this is what's going to happen as a result of this program. So teachers will learn how to use VR in their classroom. We've done educational VR programs where we give preference to teachers, and they can come try out VR. VR is going to be in classrooms probably within the next 5 or 10 years. if not sooner. The library is a great place for them to just come and try it out and get to see what there is. And also, I take VR out to classrooms sometimes as well. Um, Students will demonstrate an increased interest in science and technology by experiencing this, VR application. Obviously, like what admin can look at that and say, like, that's not amazing. We want VR, but of course you have to make it happen. And outcomes-based assessment, there's a lot more to it than just writing your outcomes. You have to talk about measurements and evaluation. But I didn't want to spend too much time on this because I don't know if this is what you guys are interested in, but I do have some packets and things that I'm happy to email people. So if you do want that information, please feel free to email me. There's even a online course that I can give you a link to where you can get way more information on outcomes-based assessment to help convince your supervisors that VR is what you want to be doing at the library. And then what is my next slide? Okay, so this is just something I just figured you guys might like some kind of ideas on what kind of programs we do. There, you can kind of look through this, and I'm sure the slides will be available for you if you'd like. Some of the potential programs, though, VR for seniors is something that I actually have planned this fall, and I'm really excited about trying out. That's one audience that we haven't talked about yet. Mental health and those with developmental disabilities. VR is supposed to be, can be therapeutic for different folks with all kinds of different conditions. So I haven't delved into that yet, but I'm really excited about trying that. And then something you can do with Google Cardboard is the VR college visits. So that's something I really want to try where people are able to go to different colleges because pretty much every major university out there has a VR tour available that you can use a Google Cardboard to check out the campus. And even a lot of community colleges and smaller colleges have that now. And so that's a great teen program to offer by appointment, which I do want to try at some point, but we actually don't have Google Cardboard here, so I need to make that happen. And I think that might be about it. I did list a couple of the programs we're doing here. I don't know how far away you guys are from Bloomington, but we do have some upcoming programs in September, October, and November that I would love to have you guys come and try out or just observe if you're interested. And again, feel free to email me with any questions. And thank you guys very much.
And I did want to interject that the Indiana State Library does have 2 VR kits. There's an Oculus Rift in each kit. They are checked out for the rest of this year and into next year, but you can contact one of your regional coordinators in the state to schedule a reservation on one of those, and they're available for 3-month checkouts. I just wanted to.
Yeah, that's awesome. And yeah, if anyone does have any questions, I'm happy to answer any.
I'm going to put up the LEU pod now. So if anybody wants to get a TLEU for today's training, just select the document from the file share and then click download files, and you should be able to save a copy to your computer.
Could have a question coming in.
I'd be curious to hear what different types of equipment people have across the state. I know that they just released another VR unit on the marketplace a couple months ago.
Yeah, if you guys want to type what kind of stuff you have, I will answer this question in the meantime. We have an MSI, I would have to look up the specific model number, but we have an MSI like VR ready gaming laptop. We got a grant for that, so we were able to kind of purchase a VR ready laptop. You can use desktops or laptops if you're willing to lug those around. If you have like a cart or something, you can use a desktop. But yeah, we use a high-powered MSI, and if you're interested, Mike, I can get you the specifics on that. But yeah, MSI works great. If you can afford it, like one that says VR ready, I mean, it's kind of like you might be getting kind of taken. You're probably paying for that sign that says VR ready. I would actually just really what you need is like any reputable brand, and then just check your specs. Make sure you've got the RAM that it needs, and you've got the graphics card that it needs, and that's all you need. So I don't actually necessarily recommend MSI except for the fact that we have one and it works well. Oh, cool. So you guys have like Google Cardboard and a PSVR. Um, so both ends of the spectrum.
What are Hutu goggles?
Yeah, I don't
Oh,
know who
they're
to
just
go.
plastic. Okay, so they're like branded Google Cardboard. Okay,
Hmm.
that's cool.
Um, we run, so what we do with the computer updates, Mike, is we just it does actually do like want to do updates often. We just have the auto update set. And what we do is the day of each program, like a couple hours before, whenever we're starting to get ready to set up, we just go ahead and turn on the laptop and run all the updates that it needs because we've learned the hard way that we need to open up that computer about an hour or two before the program. But usually, if you keep up on it, those updates are only about 15 minutes of updates. So if you're speaking specifically about maybe the Oculus app or Steam, those are the things that we use mostly for the VR programs. They don't actually need updates a lot of the time. Sometimes a specific game or experience will need to run an update. So it's just great to check that before the program. But yeah, I wouldn't say like I feel like we spend too much time doing updates. And again, feel free to email me if you guys want to talk more. I love talking about VR. I could talk about it all day. Um, so feel free to email me and or even call me. I can I can add my or email me and I can give you my phone number.
Does anyone have any other questions for Jeanette today? Well, if there's no more questions, I'm gonna leave the window up so you can download a TLEU if you still need it until 11 a.m. And then I'm gonna close out the screen. We are still here, so if you have any questions, just type them in the chat box, and we'd be happy to answer them. Otherwise, we're going to turn off the microphone for now. And I hope